The transmission cut through the galactic assembly like a knife through soft flesh. Every diplomat, every ambassador, every representative from 100 different species stopped talking at once. On the massive display screen, a city burned. Ambassador Priya Sharma watched the footage with growing horror. The Colovians were dying. Their crystalline bodies shattered under orbital bombardment. Their four-legged forms ran through streets that had turned to rivers of molten glass. Children screamed in frequencies that most species could not hear, but Priya heard them clearly through her translator. The Vorix Dominion had invaded 3 days ago. Nobody knew exactly why. The Colovians had no military. They grew food. They traded peacefully. They had never harmed anyone in their entire history as a species. Around the assembly chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Sindari ambassador studied his claws. The Morvathi delegation suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. Everyone knew what was happening. Nobody wanted to get involved. The Vorix had 300 warships. They had conquered 11 species in the last century. They were not enemies anyone wanted to make. An elderly Colovian diplomat named Orin stood at the central platform. His crystalline skin had dulled with age. Cracks ran along his limbs like old scars. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of desperation. "We ask for help," Orin said simply. "We have no army. We cannot fight. Our people are dying. Is there no one who will stand with us?" Silence answered him. Priya felt sick. She had been a diplomat for 20 years. She had seen species abandoned before. She had watched civilizations fall while the galaxy looked away. This was how things worked. The strong survived. The weak did not. It was cruel, but it was reality. She was about to look away like everyone else when her assistant grabbed her arm. "Ambassador," the young man whispered urgently, "you need to see this." He handed her a data pad. On it was a file from Earth's historical archives. A file that was 200 years old. Priya read it. Then she read it again. Her hands began to shake. 2 centuries ago, humanity had sent its first colony ship beyond the solar system. The vessel carried 4,000 people. Families, children, dreamers who wanted to build a new home among the stars. The ship's engine had failed in deep space. No rescue was possible. Earth was too far away. The colonists had enough air for 3 months, but their food supplies had been damaged in the malfunction. They would starve long before they suffocated. They sent distress calls that nobody answered. They prepared to die. Then a Colovian cargo vessel found them. The Colovians were on a routine trading mission. Their ship was small. They had food meant for their own journey and nothing more. When they discovered the stranded human vessel, they faced a simple choice. They could share their food and risk starvation themselves. Or they could fly away and let the humans die. The Colovians never hesitated. They gave everything. Every grain, every nutrient pack, every emergency ration. They gave until they had nothing left for themselves. By the time both ships reached the nearest station, 847 Colovians had died of starvation. They had watched their friends and family members wither away so that strangers from a species they had never met could live. The humans survived. All 4,000 of them. Priya looked up from the data pad. Across the chamber, old Orin stood alone at the platform, waiting for an answer that would not come. He probably did not even know about the rescue. It had happened long before he was born. The Colovians had never asked for anything in return. They had never mentioned it. They had simply helped because helping was the right thing to do. And now his people were dying, and the galaxy was going to let it happen. Priya stood up. Every eye in the chamber turned toward her. "The human delegation requests a recess," she announced. Her voice was steady despite the fire building in her chest. She walked out of the chamber without waiting for approval. Her fingers were already typing a message to Earth. The message was simple. 200 years ago, the Colovians gave us tomorrow. 847 of them died, so 4,000 humans could live. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. They simply saved us because it was right. Now they are dying, and they are too proud to remind us of what they did. They do not need to remind us. We remember. We have always remembered. It is time to show the galaxy what their kindness purchased. Within the hour, the president of Earth read the message. Within 2 hours, the order went out to every human military installation in the galaxy. Within 3 hours, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled began to move. Old Orin was still standing at the platform when Priya returned to the chamber. His crystalline eyes had gone dim with defeat. He expected nothing. Priya walked up to him and took his ancient, cracked hand in hers. "Help is coming," she said softly. "What?" Oren asked. "We have nothing to offer. We cannot pay." Priya smiled. There were tears in her eyes. "You paid 200 years ago. You just never sent us the bill." Nobody had seen President Ana Reyes cry in public before. She was known for her iron composure. She had faced economic crises, terrorist attacks, and first contact with hostile species without showing a flicker of emotion. Now she stood before the cameras with wet cheeks and made no effort to hide it. "Every human child learns about the 847, she said. Her voice was raw. "We learn about strangers who found our ancestors dying in the void. We learn about people who gave everything they had so humans they had never met could survive. We learn that 847 Colovians chose to starve rather than let our great-grandparents die." She paused. Billions watched. Today, those people need us. The Vorix Dominion has invaded their homeworld. The galaxy has turned away. Economic sanctions have been threatened against any species that intervenes. Ana Reyes lifted her chin. "I do not care about sanctions. I do not care about trade agreements. I do not care about political convenience. 200 years ago, the Colovians did not calculate the cost of saving us. They did not weigh political consequences. They simply helped because it was right." She leaned toward the camera. "Today, we remember. Today, we pay what cannot be priced. And God help anyone who stands in our way." 3 days later, Fleet Admiral David Okonkwo stood in the command center of Earth's United Defense Command and stared at numbers that made no sense. The Vorix had 300 warships in Colovian space. Humanity's available fleet numbered 180 vessels. The math was simple. They would lose 20 admirals and generals surrounded the tactical display. None of them suggested canceling the mission. "We're outnumbered," Admiral Okonkwo said calmly. "We're outgunned. Our supply lines will be stretched thin. The Galactic Council has warned us that intervention will result in economic isolation." He looked around the room. "Does anyone want to stay home?" Not a single hand rose. "Good. Now let's figure out how to win anyway." The planning session lasted 18 hours. By the end, they had something that might work. It relied on speed, surprise, and the kind of reckless courage that military textbooks warned against. That IT would have to be enough. But something unexpected happened while the military planned. Word spread about the Colovians. The story of the 847 was retold on every news channel, every social media platform, every dinner table on Earth and her colonies. People who had never thought about the Colovians suddenly remembered them. Grandparents told grandchildren about lessons they had learned in school. Old photographs of the rescued colonists circulated online. And then the volunteers started calling. Veterans who had retired decades ago demanded to be reinstated. Civilian cargo pilots offered their ships for supply runs. Engineering companies worked through the night to retrofit vessels with weapons and armor. Medical teams signed up for battlefield deployment. A billionaire donated his entire private fleet of luxury yachts to be converted into combat vessels. A grandmother who had survived the original rescue organized a fundraising campaign that crashed 3 banking systems with the sheer volume of donations. People showed up at military bases carrying old rifles, asking where to sign up. Admiral Okonkwo had planned for a fleet of 180 ships. By departure day, he had 240, with more on the way. Half of them were barely combat ready. Some were held together with welding patches and hoped that IT did not matter. They were going anyway. Across the galaxy, other species watched in confusion. The Sindari ambassador sent a formal inquiry asking if humans had misread the tactical situation. Surely they understood they could not win. The human response was 4 words: "We're going anyway." The Morvathi High Council speculated that humans must have a secret weapon or hidden reinforcements. No rational species would commit to a losing battle for a debt they were never asked to pay. They were still speculating when the human fleet jumped into hyperspace. Admiral Okonkwo stood on the bridge of his flagship, then never forgot. Around him, 240 vessels carried 50,000 human soldiers, pilots, engineers, and medics toward a battle they might not survive. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "In a few hours, we will face an enemy that outnumbers us. They expect us to be rational. They expect us to calculate costs and benefits like everyone else in this galaxy." He smiled grimly. "They are about to learn something important about humanity, Some debts cannot be measured in numbers. Some prices cannot be calculated. And when someone saves your people, you do not forget. Not ever. He closed the channel and watched the stars stretch into lines as the fleet jumped. Behind them, the galaxy watched in disbelief. Ahead of them, the Vorix waited. They had no idea what was coming. Warlord Dravak had conquered 6 species. He had burned worlds and broken civilizations. He had earned his title through blood and terror, and nothing in the galaxy frightened him anymore. When his sensors detected the human fleet arriving at the edge of Colovian space, he laughed. His officers laughed with him. They had studied human military history. They knew humanity was clever but small, brave but limited. The humans had never fought a major war against a galactic power. They were children playing at soldiers. 200 ships. Dravak growled with amusement. We have 300. Do these mammals not understand mathematics? He ordered his fleet into standard attack formation. This would be quick that it was not quick. The humans did not fight like any species Dravak had encountered. They did not form neat battle lines. They did not follow predictable patterns. Their ships moved like angry insects, swarming in from unexpected angles, retreating when pressed, attacking where least expected. Drone swarms filled the void. Electronic warfare scrambled Vorix targeting systems. Human vessels that appeared crippled suddenly came back to life and fired into exposed flanks. Within the first hour, Dravak lost 12 ships. He had expected to lose none. They fight like cornered animals, one of his commanders reported with surprise. Then we corner them harder, Dravak snarled. He pushed his fleet forward. Superior numbers would eventually tell. He just had to be patient. But the humans would not let him be patient. A human destroyer called the Remembrance led a squadron directly into the heart of the Vorix formation. They were outgunned 10-1. It should have been suicide. Captain Yuki Tanaka commanded the Remembrance. Her ship took hit after hit as she drove deeper into enemy territory. Systems failed. Fires broke out. Crew members died at their stations. She did not turn back. A Colovian evacuation transport was trying to escape with 3,000 civilians aboard. A Vorix carrier had cut off its retreat. In seconds, those civilians would die. Yuki Tanaka made her choice. Her final transmission reached every ship in both fleets. This is the Remembrance. Reactor containment failing. All hands lost. We are not retreating. To the Colovians watching, your ancestors saved our ancestors. This is what that kindness bought you. She paused. Her voice was calm. For the 847, the Remembrance flew directly into the Vorix carrier's open hangar bay and detonated its reactor. The explosion destroyed both ships. The evacuation transport escaped. 3,000 Colovians lived because one human captain remembered a debt. Dravak felt something cold creep into his chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. He ordered a full assault. Enough games. He would crush these humans with overwhelming force. The battle raged for 6 more hours. Human ships fell. Vorix ships fell. The void filled with debris and bodies and the screaming transmissions of the dying. Then Dravak's ground forces broke through. The orbital defenses were gone. Nothing could stop his troops from landing. He sent them to a major Colovian city. Not for strategic purposes. For terror. He wanted the humans to know what their interference had cost. The bombardment lasted 20 minutes. 50,000 Colovians died. Civilians. Children. Elders. They had no weapons. They could not fight back. They simply died while the humans watched helplessly from orbit. Admiral Okonkwo received the casualty reports in silence. His officers waited for orders. The tactical situation was dire. They had lost 40 ships. They were low on ammunition. The rational choice was retreat. Okonkwo said nothing for 1 full minute. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Quieter. Colder. New orders. All defensive operations cease immediately. We are going on full attack. His tactical officer hesitated. Sir, we don't have the numbers for that. We'll take catastrophic losses. I am aware. Sir, with respect, this is tactical suicide. Admiral Okonkwo turned to face his officer. His eyes were empty. They bombed civilians. They murdered 50,000 people who could not fight back. They did it to frighten us. To make us retreat. He turned back to the display. They miscalculated. He opened a channel that broadcast on all frequencies, human and Vorix alike. Warlord Dravak. This is Admiral David Okonkwo of the Human Defense Force. You have my attention now. You wanted us to see what happens when we interfere with your conquests. You wanted us to understand the cost of challenging you. His voice hardened into something sharp. We understand. And now you will understand something about us. You cannot frighten humanity by hurting the innocent. You can only make us angry. And when we get angry, we do not stop. We do not negotiate. We do not forgive. He leaned forward. You wanted humanity's attention. You have it. You will wish you didn't. The channel closed. The human fleet surged forward. The real battle had just begun. The rubble of the bombed city still smoked when the human aid workers arrived. They came in medical transports that had flown through active combat zones. They came knowing they might die. They came anyway. Marine Sergeant Rosa Gutierrez was supposed to be providing security for the medical teams. Instead, she found herself kneeling in the wreckage of what had been someone's home that a small Colovian child sat in the ruins. Her crystalline body was cracked and clouded with dust. Her forelegs were tucked beneath her. She had not moved in hours. She had not spoken. Her name was Sila. She was 7 years old. Her entire family had died in the bombardment. Rosa tried speaking to her. She tried offering food and water. She tried everything the training manuals suggested. Nothing worked. Rosa stopped trying. She just sat down next to Sila and stayed there. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Other aid workers came and went. Rosa did not move. She did not speak. She was simply present. 14 hours after Rosa first found her, Sila finally spoke. They fell down, the child said. Her voice was like wind through broken glass. My mother, my father, my brother. They fell down and did not get up. Rosa felt her heart crack. I know, she said softly. I am so sorry. Why did you come? Sila asked. You are not Colovian. This is not your world. Rosa reached into her uniform and pulled out a small medallion. Every human soldier in the fleet carried one. It was engraved with the number 847 and a word in the old Colovian language. Do you know what this word means? Rosa asked. Sila looked at the medallion. Her cracked eyes widened slightly. Gift, she whispered. It means gift. 200 years ago, your people gave mine a gift, Rosa said. They saved us when we were dying. They gave us tomorrow when we had none left. 847 of them died, so we could live. She pressed the medallion into Sila's small crystalline hand. We came because your ancestors taught us what kindness looks like. We came to give the gift back. In orbit, the battle had transformed. Human reinforcements kept arriving. Not just military vessels anymore. Ships from distant colonies that had spent weeks in hyperspace. Private citizens who had welded weapons onto cargo haulers. Mining vessels and transport ships and passenger liners that had no business being in a war zone. A converted mining ship called the Debtor's Honor rammed a Vorix cruiser at full speed. Its captain, a 60-year-old grandmother named Patricia O'Yelleran, survived the impact and was rescued 3 hours later. When asked why she had done it, she shrugged. My grandfather was on the colony ship, she said. A Colovian gave him their last meal so he could live long enough to have children. I exist because of their kindness. Seems only fair to return the favor. Galactic observers transmitted reports filled with confusion. The Sindari ambassador cornered a human diplomat at a neutral station. Why do your civilians fight? The Sindari demanded. They are not soldiers. They have no obligation. They could flee to safety. This is not their war. The human diplomat smiled sadly. Every human child learns about the 847. Every human knows what the Colovians did for us. This is our war. It always was. The Sindari did not understand. He had lived his entire life in a galaxy where species helped each other only when it was profitable. The idea of ordinary people risking their lives for a debt they never personally owed was simply beyond his comprehension. That on the Vorix flagship, Warlord Dravak reviewed the latest battle reports with growing unease. The humans were not fighting rationally. When they were outnumbered, they did not retreat. When they were offered favorable surrender terms, they refused. When their ships were crippled, the crews stayed at their posts until the end. His advisors had begun using a word that Dravak had not heard in many years. A word the Vorix had nearly forgotten because they had not needed it since they became conquerors. Fear. They feared the humans. Not because humanity was stronger. Not because human weapons were superior. They feared humanity because the humans fought as if dying meant nothing. They fought for something beyond survival or profit or power. They fought for love, for gratitude, for memory, and against such enemies, the Vorix had no idea how to win. Back on the planet's surface, night had fallen over the ruined city. Rosa still sat with Sela. The child had fallen asleep against her shoulder. Rosa looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond those stars, her fellow humans were fighting and dying. Somewhere up there, the fate of an entire species hung in the balance. She held the sleeping child a little tighter. This was why they had come. Not for glory, not for power, not for anything that could be counted or measured or spent. They had come because kindness deserved an answer, even if that answer took 200 years to arrive. 3 weeks of war had reduced the Vorix fleet from 300 ships to 94. Warlord Dravak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Pride, and watched another 3 of his vessels explode on the display screen. Human ships swarmed around them like predators circling wounded prey. "Reinforcements from the homeworld?" he asked. "Delayed," his communications officer replied. "The High Command is reconsidering the campaign." Reconsidering, a polite word for cowardice. The Vorix leadership had expected an easy conquest. They had not expected humanity to respond. Now they were leaving Dravak to die while they calculated whether the Colovian territory was still worth the cost. Dravak snarled, but said nothing. He had conquered 6 species with this fleet. He had been unstoppable. Now he was losing to civilians in retrofitted cargo ships. The humans had lost 67 vessels. They should have retreated after the first 20. Instead, they kept coming. More ships arrived every day. Some barely held together. Some had crews of volunteers who had never fired a weapon before. It did not matter. They fought anyway. Admiral Okonkwo had begun a new tactic that Dravak did not understand. Every hour, on every Vorix frequency, a human voice broadcast a single number, the Colovian civilian death toll, just the number. No threats, no demands, no speeches. 73, 847 dead. 73, 848 dead. 73, 849 dead. The Vorix crews listened to those numbers. They heard them in their sleep. They heard them during meals. They heard them while they watched their comrades die. The weight was unbearable. Captain Ravek of the cruiser, Iron Fury, was the first to defect. He surrendered his ship to the humans and requested asylum. When Dravak demanded to know why, Ravek's response was simple. "We came here for territory. They came here for love. We cannot win against that. I will not die for a cause that has already lost." 2 more captains defected within the day. Dravak executed 3 of his own officers for cowardice. It did not help. The rot had spread too deep. His crews whispered to each other. They wondered why they were dying for a planet they did not need against enemies who would not stop. The Vorix had conquered through strength for 1,000 years. They had never faced enemies who fought for something beyond power. They had no framework for understanding humanity. No strategy to counter an opponent that treated death as an acceptable price for loyalty. Admiral Okonkwo offered terms. Complete withdrawal from Colovian space. Reparations for civilian casualties. War crime tribunals for officers who ordered the bombardment. Dravak refused. He would not surrender to mammals. Okonkwo's response arrived within the hour. The human fleet stopped fighting defensively. They attacked with coordinated fury. Ships that could have been destroyed were allowed to retreat. Ships that stayed to fight were annihilated without mercy. The message was clear. Mercy would be offered once. Those who refused would find none. Dravak watched his fleet crumble. The Iron Claw was cut apart by human destroyers. The Blood Dawn was rammed by a civilian transport whose captain had lost 2 sons in the colony ship rescue 2 centuries ago. The Eternal Conquest was boarded by human marines who fought through every corridor until the ship was theirs. By the 3rd week, Dravak had 94 ships, then 80, then 60, then 30. The Conqueror's Pride floated alone in the void, surrounded by human vessels. His crew had abandoned their posts. His officers had surrendered or fled. He stood on his bridge with a handful of loyal guards. Watching the end approach, a human ship hailed him. "Warlord Dravak, this is Admiral Okonkwo. Your fleet is destroyed. Your reinforcements are not coming. Surrender and face justice for your crimes against the Colovian people." Dravak laughed. It was a broken sound. "You have won nothing, human. I am one warlord. There are others. The Dominion will not forget this humiliation." We will return. We will burn your worlds. We will make you pay for this." The channel was silent for a moment. Then Okonkwo spoke. "You still do not understand. We came here because the Colovians saved us 200 years ago. We will come again if you threaten them. We will come every time. For as long as humanity exists, we will remember what the Colovians did for us." His voice hardened. "Threaten our friends again. See what happens." The channel closed. Dravak stood alone on his burning bridge. His empire had conquered through fear for 1,000 years. They had never imagined that someone might conquer through love. He opened a broadcast to the entire galaxy. His final words: "We did not understand what we attacked. The humans do not fight like a species. They fight like a debt collector. And their memory is endless." The transmission ended. The conqueror's pride exploded moments later. The Vorix Dominion's invasion of Colovian space was over. 6 months had passed since the last Vorix ship fled Colovian space. The world of Serenus was slowly healing. Human construction crews worked beside Colovian engineers to rebuild the shattered cities. Medical teams treated survivors. Teachers helped Colovian children process the trauma they had experienced. Farmers helped restore fields that had been burned. Nobody asked for payment. Nobody expected anything in return. In the capital city, a memorial had been built. 2 figures stood at its center, a human and a Colovian, their hands and crystalline limbs intertwined. Around them, 847 lights glowed softly. They never dimmed. They would never dim. The dedication ceremony drew millions of viewers across the galaxy. Ambassador Priya Sharma stood before the Galactic Assembly once again. This time, the representatives were not looking away. They were watching with something that might have been shame. "We did not fight for territory," Priya said. Her voice carried across the chamber. "We did not fight for resources or trade agreements or political advantage. We fought because 200 years ago, people we had never met gave everything so that strangers could live." She paused. "The galaxy has asked what humanity wants in return for our intervention. Our answer is simple. We want nothing. That is the point. That has always been the point." She looked around the chamber. Sindari, Morvathi, dozens of other species who had watched the Colovians die and done nothing. Kindness is not a transaction. It is not an investment. It is not leverage. It is simply what good people do for each other. The Colovians understood that 2 centuries ago. We hope the rest of the galaxy can learn it now. The Vorix Dominion was in chaos. Their subject species had watched the invasion fail. They had seen that cruelty could be challenged, that conquerors could be defeated. Rebellions spread across Vorix space. Species that had been enslaved for generations rose up. The Dominion that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years was tearing itself apart. All because humanity had remembered a debt of kindness that on Serenus. Sela stood before the memorial with her new mother. The adoption had taken 3 months of paperwork and negotiations. Rosa Gutierrez had never intended to become a parent. She had come to Colovian space as a soldier. She had stayed because a broken child needed someone to stay. Sela placed a crystal flower at the base of the memorial. The flower had been grown from her own crystalline tears, a Colovian tradition for honoring the dead. "My family is in the lights now," Sela said quietly. "All 847 of them, plus the new ones who died protecting us." Rosa knelt beside her. "Yes, they are all together now." Sela looked up at her mother. Her crystalline eyes had healed, though faint cracks remained. They would always remain. "Why did your people come?" she asked. "Really, not the speeches. The real reason." Rosa thought about it for a long moment. "Because someone taught us that kindness matters more than profit. That helping strangers is worth any price. That what you give away freely comes back to you in ways you cannot imagine." She touched the medallion at her chest. The one engraved with 847 and the Colovian word for gift. "Your ancestors taught us that. We just wanted to prove we learned the lesson." Sela wrapped her 4 arms around her mother. Crystalline and flesh. 2 species who had saved each other across 200 years of memory. "Family," Sela said. It was the human word she had practiced most. "Family," Rosa agreed. Across the galaxy, the story spread. A Sindari merchant vessel encountered a stranded transport from a species they had never met. The transport was damaged. Its crew was dying. Rescue would be expensive and dangerous. The Sindari captain hesitated. His people had always calculated costs before offering help. That was simply how the galaxy worked. But then he remembered the humans. He remembered the Colovians. He remembered what a debt of kindness had purchased across 2 centuries. Initiate rescue operations, he ordered. His crew looked at him with confusion. Sir, we have no obligation to help them. It will cost us significant resources. I know. Then what? The captain watched the stranded transport on his view screen. Strangers. People he had never met. People who could offer him nothing in return. Because someday, someone might remember we were kind. And in this galaxy, as the humans have shown us, that memory is worth more than any empire. The rescue began. Somewhere in the void between stars, the universe grew a little bit brighter, and 847 lights that would never dim seemed to glow just a little bit warmer.